I was emptying a trash bin outside room 8 at 11:52 p.m., 40 minutes into my first shift as a night cleaner, when a monitor alarm changed pitch in a way most people in that hallway wouldn't have registered as different from routine. I did. My body reacted before my brain finished the thought. That's a respiratory distress pattern, not a battery warning. 3 years earlier, recognizing that exact sound had been my entire job. That night, I was holding a mop. I'm Priya Anand, 34, and for 9 years I worked as an ICU nurse at Grayson Memorial Hospital, a career I'd built since finishing my nursing degree at 23, one I genuinely believed, until 3 years ago, I'd still be doing well into my 60s. On a Thursday in March 2022, I was 14 hours into a mandatory 16-hour shift, covering for two nurses who'd called out sick, managing 6 ICU patients alone in a unit staffed, on paper, for a maximum of 3 patients per nurse. Exhausted and moving on autopilot, I administered a medication from a vial that looked nearly identical to the one I intended, a mix-up that contributed to the death of 71-year-old patient Harold Weiss 6 hours later. Grayson's internal risk management review, completed 11 weeks later, concluded the error stemmed from individual medication administration failure, language that appeared nowhere alongside the fact that I'd been working my 4th consecutive double shift that month due to a staffing shortage. The hospital had been formally warned about, in writing, by the unit's charge nurses 4 separate times in the preceding year. The state nursing board's 14-month investigation ultimately revoked my license, finding my individual error sufficient grounds for discipline regardless of contributing staffing conditions, a determination that felt, at the time, less like accountability and more like the hospital successfully redirecting blame away from itself and squarely onto me. I spent the following 3 years unable to find healthcare-adjacent work of any kind, cycling through retail and administrative jobs that rarely lasted more than a few months, watching my savings disappear alongside what remained of my professional identity, eventually sliding into a major depressive episode I didn't seek treatment for until my 2nd year of unemployment had already done considerable damage. When a night cleaning contractor posted an opening for Grayson Memorial's overnight custodial crew, I applied anyway, under my legally changed surname, telling myself it was simply the closest, most immediate paycheck available. If I'm honest, some smaller part of me also wanted to stand inside that building again, on different terms, before I let myself fully walk away from medicine forever. My supervisor assigned me to the ICU wing for my very first shift, a coincidence of scheduling rather than anything deliberate, placing me back in the exact unit I hadn't set foot in since the week of Harold Weiss's death. The patient in room 8, 68-year-old Rosa Castellano, was showing early signs of acute respiratory distress, shallow, rapid breathing, and a subtle color change in her lips, details a bystander might easily miss, but that 9 years of ICU training made instantly, unmistakably obvious to me. I didn't touch her medication, adjust any equipment, or attempt any clinical intervention beyond my legal scope that night. I hit the emergency call button immediately, then went to the nurse's station myself when no one arrived within seconds, reporting clearly and specifically what I'd observed: respiratory rate, color change, room number, exact time of onset. The unit's sole nurse on duty that night, Diane Okafor, was managing 7 ICU patients alone, more than double the hospital's own internal safety ratio, after 2 scheduled colleagues called out and no replacement coverage had been secured, an almost exact echo of the staffing conditions from 3 years earlier. A rapid response team reached Mrs. Castellano within 90 seconds of my report, stabilizing her acute respiratory failure with appropriate emergency intervention, care that arrived meaningfully faster, the attending physician later noted, because whoever reported it had described her condition with unusual clinical precision for hallway staff. Diane found me afterward, studying my face with an expression I recognized immediately as recognition. Priya? She asked. Priya Anand? We'd worked adjacent shifts, together for nearly 2 years before my termination, though we'd never been especially close. Diane's trembling voice carried 3 years of something she admitted she'd never found the right moment to say aloud. She'd always believed I'd been scapegoated, and she'd personally kept copies of the staffing complaints filed before my incident, uncertain what, if anything, she could ever do with them. Diane requested a formal incident report be filed on Mrs. Castellano's near miss, explicitly citing the unit's staffing ratio as a contributing factor, then contacted the hospital's compliance office directly the next morning, submitting both the new incident report and the staffing complaints she'd preserved from 3 years earlier as supporting documentation. The convergence of two nearly identical staffing failures, 3 years apart, prompted the hospital's board to commission an independent safety audit, which formally confirmed that Grayson's ICU had operated below safe staffing thresholds on at least 40 documented nights across the preceding 4 years. Diane's documentation, combined with the new audit findings, formed the basis of a formal petition to the state nursing board requesting review of my original disciplinary case in light of newly substantiated systemic contributing factors, a petition Diane filed with my permission, though I hadn't dared to expect much from it. The board's review, completed 7 months later, didn't erase the original incident, but formally amended my disciplinary record to reflect the documented systemic staffing failures as a contributing factor, restoring my eligibility to reapply for licensure under a structured, supervised re-entry pathway. Facing renewed regulatory scrutiny, Grayson's board approved mandatory minimum ICU staffing ratios enforced through an independent auditing system, alongside 23 new nursing hires funded through a budget reallocation the hospital had previously called financially unfeasible for years. I completed my supervised reentry requirements 5 months later and returned to nursing, deliberately choosing a different unit at a different hospital entirely, not out of resentment toward Grayson, but because I wanted my second chance to be built on something new rather than proving anything to the building that once let me become its scapegoat. I spent 3 years believing that single exhausted night had permanently defined what I was capable of, until an accident of scheduling put me back in a hallway where the exact same systemic failure was quietly repeating itself, waiting for someone to finally notice out loud. The lesson isn't that expertise never disappears, even when the world stops recognizing it. It's that the people institutions blame individually for systemic failures rarely get the chance to prove that truth, and sometimes it takes an entirely different uniform and a coincidence nobody could have planned before anyone's willing to actually listen.